Okay, let's get the bot in here. Do get our Discord taken care of. And I should probably walk on screen. Alright, hello everyone, this is Chris Ingerson, and it is August 31st, and this is the August 31st, not quite Text Quest Devstream. So today we're not going to be working on Text Quest, it's the weekend. I'm going to be working on a little side project that I've been poking. It's nothing major, but it is a fun little exercise in tooling for me. A friend of mine, a fellow developer, is has been making art assets for use in 2D games, and he's selling those assets on itch.io. If you're curious, he trying not to be too much of a shill, but I guess I don't really have a reason not to be. If you like the art that you see as I'm working, feel free to check out this art pack. It's on itch.io. This is the URL up here, lunarsignals.itch.io/notzelda2. If you just search for Not Zelda 2, or just Not Zelda, because he has two packs. They're currently on sale. I definitely recommend checking them out. They're really good assets. And a while back, when he first released this asset, I mentioned to him that I was wanting to work with Unity 2D stuff, and I offered to basically set up tiling and all that for support in with Unity's new 2D workflows. So this is a fun little exercise for me, and it'll benefit one of my developer buddies. So we're going to be basically doing a bunch of tooling to help with workflows and getting sprites set up in Unity. Recently, when I went on vacation, I took this art pack with me, and I worked on it a little bit up in a cabin where I was secluded. And there are a couple of things that I learned. One, setting up sprites is a very, very, very time-consuming process if you want to make very specific sprite names on large sprite sheets. That is very hard for me to say for some reason. In any case, while I was laying these sprites out and setting them up to use specific names and have proper padding and all that, I was thinking about how I could make tools to improve this process. So there are two main tools that we're going to be working on today. I have three tools that I have kind of set up. They're not fully functional except for export. And basically we're just going to be doing a bunch of editor tooling today, kind of getting our feet wet with the with methods to set up sprites in code. It is possible to do so, and it is kind of weird, but the main idea that I want to do, or that I want to handle for improving sprite workflows, is I want to come up with a method to automatically map sprites from one texture to another. So, for example, in this art pack, there are a couple of different overhead. Let's go ahead and pull up Sprite Editor so you can see them. There's a bunch of sprites that are set up in here. And these are basically, there are three textures that are basically the same things, just with sprites or color swaps. And what I would like to do is just be able to set up sprites on one of these and then import all of those sprites and put them directly onto another texture. So you can see here that sand and snow are not set up yet. They're just one big sprite. But grass is not entirely finished being set up. I think I have like 2/3 of it, or maybe like a third or 2/5 of it done. There's a lot of sprites in this. Pretty sure that if we go all the way up here, we'll see there's like 650-ish sprites almost. Well, actually, no, it would be exactly 650 because they're indexed by 0. So it takes a long time to set these textures up, and so I spent, I think, up at the cabin setting up just part of this grass texture, which includes basically everything from this corner to here. And I don't think I have this set up. Yeah, so it's like everything from this corner to about here. I don't have this part set up yet. And that's a lot. That's a lot of textures to set up and sprites to set up. Like I said, it's about 650. So if I can improve this workflow at all to speed things up, then I don't have to spend. I think this setting up what I did here took me about I don't know, 30 minutes to 45 minutes just to set up like a third of a sprite sheet. So the idea would be that we would spend the time that's necessary to set up one sprite sheet, go through all of this, set up all these sprites, get all the names set up. And then instead of having to do that again for sand and again for snow, what I could do is I can just export the sprite data from grass into a JSON file, and then I can import that JSON file and apply all of its settings to sand and to snow. That will let me have, basically, it'll triple the efficiency. It'll mean that I get all three of these done in the time it would take me to really do one. Now, I do actually have exporting working. If we look at brick sprites, right, of course, I'll go ahead and open this up. I have exporting the sprite settings for a texture as a JSON blob. That's working perfectly fine. It gives us this massive blob of JSON. And since we have this, we can then import this JSON and apply all of those settings to a texture. That's the next part that I'm looking at. And that's kind of what we're going to be doing to start. That's probably actually what we are going to do to start. There's a couple of other things that I want to do. I need to try to figure out how to work with, say, editor tools is what they're called. It's a editor functionality that basically lets you set up tool windows. And I have never done that before, and I wanted to try and do that, basically because I was trying to set up this sort of toolbar up at the top. But in any case, we want to basically take all of the sprites that we have mapped in grass and apply them to sand. That's the first thing that we want to do for import. And for the most part, that functionality for exporting information is working. Importing has not been set up yet. I have probably about half of the classes set up that I need for that. And before we move on to that, I would like to actually adjust my export functionality a little bit. I have some things set up. But basically what happens currently, if I were to say, I'm going to export grass here, so I'm just going to drag this over to here. You can see that we have our texture showing up here. All of these have tooltips. And what I would like to do right now, if I hit export JSON, it's going to export a file, JSON file with all of this information set up. But it will export everything directly as is, which is somewhat problematic. To show you what I mean, I'll go ahead and just export this. We'll do grass_sprites. That's fine. We import that, pings it. You can see that it says like grass empty. Oh my goodness, it's like massive for each one. Grass pattern 02, blah, blah, blah. I don't know why I closed that. I'm going to need you in a second. Everything's going wrong. All right. So that's not particularly useful if everything has the exact name. That's fine if we want to leave it like that. But for things like this sand and snow, it doesn't really make sense to keep the prefix grass on everything. If we actually look at my grass sprites, you'll see that all of them are using this kind of grass prefix, which I really wish that I had done differently, because you'll see that we have grass_grass ruins, and that's going to cause a bit of a problem later. Although actually maybe it won't. Stop it. Give me the thing I want. Just to be curious. You know what? No, I don't think it will. So we're fine. So I'm going to go ahead and close this. So if I were to map sprites exactly one-to-one as they were, then sand would have all of its sprites be prefixed with grass, and that would make things somewhat confusing. So instead, what I would like to do is I want to basically allow entering sprite names. So if I wanted to, I could do something like this. I'm going to say grass, like that. And then what will happen is when we export our JSON, it's going to format those strings and replace all of the matching strings for grass with an indexer string, which if I hover over this, you'll see that it's just curly braces and a number inside of it. And that will actually let us, when we import, we can then apply formatting strings to do things like, let's say we want to export this texture and replace all of the words grass with the indexer brace 0 brace. Then that means when we import it, we can replace all of the brace 0 braces with the word sand, which lets us automatically, without any real effort on our part, rename a bunch of sprites and have them be mapped to a completely different texture. So that cuts all of that effort down, going through individually clicking on everything, manually setting up names, doing all that, down to like 5 button clicks basically for an entire sprite sheet. So we're going to obviously be doing code today. and I guess a bit of art, kind of, technically. So we're going to go ahead and currently this grass or this sprite name stuff is not factored into anything. So we're going to want to jump over to that. I'm going to close you, and we are going to we have draw import section, draw export section. This is the section that we're looking at there. So you can see here that we have our sprite names array and export JSON. Here we are. So we're going to go to definition here. First, we get our path that we want to export to. If that path is empty, then we're not going to do anything. And then if it is, what we do is, or if it's not empty, then we basically grab the asset importer for the texture at the given path. We grab all of the sprite data from it, and then we set up a sprite editor mapper data master. This is a little weird. This is a class that I made that is essentially a wrapper class for a data class that is just set up so that we can use Unity's built-in JSON serialization. You can see that we're doing that like here. We're calling JSON utility.toJSON. That way I don't have to include my own JSON library because there's no real reason for me to need to do that. We're not navigating arbitrary data. We're just setting up data classes, basically. Okay, so this is going to be a little different. I want to pass in sprite names, which is an array. It's an array of strings, and all that's going to be is the strings that need to get formatted. So let's go ahead and we're going to go down to this. We're going to pass in. Let's go ahead, actually. I'm going to say public sprite editor mapper data master. Take a sprite metadata, which is a built-in Unity class for basically referencing sprite values, like where they're mapped on the texture and whatnot. So basically, I'm just going to go ahead and come down here. We're going to copy paste that, and then I'm going to give this a string array sprite sprite names, I guess. We'll leave that as that. And this is going to pass in sprite names here. Got the hiccups. I'm going to go down here. Obviously, this isn't going to do anything quite yet. So we're going to go ahead and come down here, paste this in, and then I'm going to add a string sprite names. Okay. And what we want to do here is a little weird because basically, oof. This is going to be very awkward. So instead of name being this, it's going to be a weird for loop, kind of. So we're going to say for int I equals 0, I is less than sprite names dot length, I plus plus. I'm going to go ahead and do that. I really don't want to do this in this manner. I might real quick just say using system.text. Let's see if we can conveniently do this with not system.text, with a string builder instead. Because otherwise we're going to be building tons of strings per thing, and that's going to cause tons of garbage. So let's go to string builder temp is equal to new string builder name, and all we're going to do there is say temp. Can I do replace? Yes. Let me do strings. Cool. Okay, so that's nice. We're going to go ahead and do metadata.name here. Let's do that. I'm going to comment you out. All right, so all we're going to do here in this for loop, oh, and we're going to say name is equal to temp dot name, oh, sorry, dot toString. I'm also going to rename this to name builder, I guess. Okay. And then in this for loop, all we're going to do is we're going to say name builder dot replace, and then we're going to say sprite names of I with string dot format. Ironically enough, it's going to be this. and then I. Okay, so that should basically let us replace keywords with indexers. So it's going to be a bit rough, isn't it? That's probably okay. So let's go ahead and save that, and then we're going to go ahead and go back here to Sprite Editor Mapper window. You'll see that that's fine now. And that should basically take care of writing out data. For the time being, I am also going to change this to.json call to be pretty print, so that it's a little bit easier for us to review. In the end, I'll switch that back to not printing pretty. All printing pretty does is formats the JSON so that it's much more human readable. It's not just one line of code or one line of text. So let's go ahead. We have the word grass. Again, I'm going to go ahead and hit export. We'll say save. Yes. Boom. Let's open this up. Cool. You can see that we now have everything underscored. Or not underscored. Everything is now indexed properly. So it's, 0 index, pattern 1, pattern 2, pattern 3, all of that fun stuff. So now if I were to scroll like all the way down here, you'll see that the base grass is not adjusted. That's good. I don't actually want that. So it seems like everything more or less seems to be properly set up. So now that we have that information exporting formatted, we can now import that information as well. So we don't need sprite names here. We probably could get rid of this entire thing. The original idea was going to be that we could replace sprite names, but I'm not going to worry about that. So instead, we're going to go ahead and tackle replacement names, and we want this to be sand, for example. Let's go ahead and ping that. I'm going to drag sand in here. And now all we really should have to do is import this and then click import JSON, which as of right now, I don't think actually does anything. Yes. Okay. So this is where it gets into importing assets, and this is where it's going to get fun. I'm going to be digging into Unity documentation a little bit. So I'm going to look up Unity. I'll just drag this over here. Unity, I think it's asset post processor is what I want. Yes. So for this, we want to basically set up our importer and adjust things. So I'm going to go ahead and come down here, and we need an importer. So we have a Sprite JSON importer, which I set up, but it's not actually functional yet. So let's go ahead and say Sprite JSON post processor. Sprite JSON post processor. Okay, let's go ahead and open you up. All right. So this is going to be part of sleepyal dot not Zelda 2 editor. We're going to be using Unity editor. It's going to be an asset post processor. Of course you got a lowercase p because you don't like me to have fun. Let's go ahead and close this. Let that recompile. Fortunately, this is in 2019.2 and it's not a very large project, so it won't take very long. Oh, but of course it is Unity, which means that I can't actually just leave it with a lowercase p. I have to misspell it first and then correct that because Unity hates me. Okay, so now we can go back. Sorry, I'm a huge stickler for names. I try to get things to match as much as possible. Okay, so for this, we basically need to go on post-process sprites. Yes, I think that's what we want. Okay, so with that, do we have an asset preprocessor actually? For multiple sprite mode assets, each sprite will be passed in the second argument as an array of sprite. Okay, so that's that. So I guess I don't really want a post processor. I do want a custom importer. Asset modification processor. Saving to serialized classes and scenes, which are edited inside Unity. It's not quite what I need. I didn't think that it was asset importer, because I didn't really see much that I could do there. Let's see. It's weird. I've kind of worked with this stuff in the past, but it's not 100% great. Because this is not useful to me on post-process. I can't do anything with it. So what we need, let's go ahead and go back to asset post-processor. Can I do something with texture itself? See, I don't want to post-process. I want to pre-process this. Compress the texture. See, this is the problem, is that after an asset's been fully imported, there are some things that you can't adjust, and I need to be able to change that. So I think I do need to go to asset importer. Let's see. External object map. Save asset importer. Importer is dirty. Oh. Perhaps I can do this? Okay. Perhaps not. So I might be able to like get away with just using the main thing and then re-importing it. So what are my options here? Let's go back here. Also post-processor on post-process sprites. Private void that texture 2D texture sprites. Okay. Importer, asset importer. There we go. So this is a little weird. Asset importer. It's going to give me a generic asset importer. As texture importer, that's what I need. So we're going to say this importer is equal to that. Importer.save and re-import. I guess I could try this. Yes. Except there is an explicit warning up here that makes me concerned. Hooking to several serialized assets. It's going to use a callback. That's not what we want. On post-process sprites. This is still not quite what we want. Here we go. On post-process texture. Because I don't really need the sprite information, I guess. So let's see. At this point, it's too late to choose. Note that you should avoid modifying the texture importer settings in this manner. Wait. Use on pre-process texture if you wish to change compression format. On pre-process? There is a pre-process? Oh, there is. On pre-process texture. Set of default values for the import settings. Use this callback if you want to change the compression format of the texture. Let's see here. Texture importer. Convert to normal map is equal to true. Okay. But let's see. No, you should avoid modifying texture in this manner, as it will have no effect on the texture that is currently being imported, but will apply the next time. I don't. See, that makes me that gives me pause because it makes me think that if I try to modify things with this on preprocessed texture, then it'll be weird. Um, okay, well, let's try it. Fortune favors the bold. Um, so we don't actually need this. And we're just gonna on preprocessed texture. It's gonna be that. We don't have to worry about you at all. And let's go ahead and say if asset path dot contains. So asset path, I'm assuming, yeah, that's hard set. So we actually don't want this to fire all the time. We only want it to do so when we explicitly tell it to. So what I would like to do is basically, all right. So here is the idea. Let's go over here to sprite editor mapper window. I think I'm going to need to make a struct that I can pass here. Let's go ahead and let that clear real quick. Okay. So I'm going to create a class here. Where do I want to do it though? I guess it would be under importers. Folder data. Okay. So we're going to say, so it is going to go here. A post processor calling preprocess. Go figure. So we're going to call this sprite preprocess data. Sprite preprocess data. It's a bit of an awkward mouthful, but I suppose it makes sense. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and open this up. This is going to be a struct, not a class. We're going to say public bool is valid. We're going to say return true. Actually, no, it's going to, that's fine. Okay. So the next thing we want is we need one to be properly namespaced, so not Zelda 2 editor. And two, we're going to say public, what is it? Sprite editor mapper data master data. So we're going to say is valid. We're going to say return data is not equal null. Right. Right. I forgot about that. Of course not. Well. Think. I think this just has an array. Or, yeah, it's an array of data. I guess I can just directly have the sprite editor mapper data array in there. That makes sense. Well. Yeah, sure. Okay. So we're going to return that is not equal to null. We're also going to have public string sprite names, I guess. Oops, that's not going to be anything. Okay. And then we're going to go ahead and come down to here. We're going to say public sprite pre-processed data. And all that's going to say is data is equal to new, whatever. And then sprite names is equal to new, whatever. Right, I always forget that about structs. Fine, then I guess we'll go ahead and say sprite editor mapper, data master, followed by string sprite names. Okay, so we're going to say this dot data is equal to data master dot data, and this dot sprite names is equal to sprite names. Okay. And all we're going to do there is valid. It's going to say is data not equal to null, and data.length is greater than 0. Okay. That's pretty straightforward. Let's go ahead and get rid of you. And now I can go over here to sprite post processor, and I can say public static. Do I want to make it void? I can make this a function. You know. Yeah, okay. So I'm going to say sprite pre-process data. Pre-process data, I guess, is equal to a default sprite pre-process data. We're just going to leave it like that. And then what we're going to say is on pre-processed texture, we're going to say if pre-processed data dot is valid. Then we're going to do something. And what we're going to do is we're going to get the asset being imported. I'm going to look at this to make sure. Okay. So we're going to say texture importer is equal to asset importer as texture importer. And then we're going to say importer dot sprite sheet, right? It's going to be equal to, and here's where it gets, actually, hold on. Importer dot sprite, do I have a sprite mode? Let's see, secondary sprite textures. No, sprite border. I guess sprite sheet must automatically do it. Multiple, there we go. So we're going to set that, and then we're going to say importer.sprite sheet is going to be equal to sprite metadata. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and say with this, we're going to say is valid public sprite meta. Oh, right, hold on. Using Unity Editor, we're going to say this is sprite metadata. It's going to be an array of that. We're going to say get sprite, oops, capital G, get sprite metadata. Okay, this is where things are going to get a little more complicated. So first things first, we're going to go to definition here, and I want to say, let's get rid of you. I'm going to say down here, public sprite metadata, get sprite metadata, and it's going to say sprite metadata, data is equal to new sprite metadata. Okay, I'm going to say return data. So probably I can actually simplify this a bunch and just say return this, and then we get to do all this fun stuff. So we're going to say I think this is actually going to work. I know you're not going to work quite yet. Don't complain too much. Okay. So this is going to be this dot alignment. Okay, so all of that should be correct. The only difference is we need to allow for sprite names. So, we're going to go ahead and copy this. Paste this down here, string sprite names. And then, of course, we're going to do another string builder. New name is equal to new, this is not name. And then we're going to do for int I equals 0, I is less than sprite names. Can I do that actually? Hold on. Not format. No, because it's an object. Well, no, that actually might be enough. This dot name with sprite names. I think that might be all I have to do. So let's go ahead and try that. Okay, so let's see what... Well, anyway. Okay, I think we're good there. So let's go ahead and pop back over here. Wait, where was I? There we are. So we're going to say this is equal to preprocessed data.get sprite metadata. We're going to go to definition here. And then we get the fun stuff. So we're going to go ahead and say sprite metadata. Metadata is equal to new sprite metadata. And it's going to be data.length. That's how long it is. Say for int I equals 0, I is less than data.length, I plus plus. We're going to return metadata at the end here. And then for this, we're just going to say metadata of I is equal to data of I dot get sprite metadata, passing in sprite names. Okay, I think that's all we need to do. So that means that what we should be able to do in theory is, if we come back over here to sprite editor mapper window, for import sprite JSON, you can see that we're creating a sprite editor mapper data master. After we do that, we're going to say sprite JSON post processor. Actually, before I do any of that, I'm going to come over to here and I'm just going to say debug.log asset path. I want to make sure that this fires without me having to do anything else. Okay. So let's go ahead and import sand. Okay. So nothing changed. That's good, because nothing was valid. So that gives us our debug. We double click on that. It should open up right there. Cool. So that did get called. That's good. And what we're going to do is we're going to come down here. Oh, and at the end here, we're going to say preprocessed data is equal to default sprite preprocessed data. We just want it to be the default. And then we're going to come over here to sprite mapper window. Cool. So now that we have this, we can say sprite mapper. Sprite. What was it? Sprite preprocessed data. Preprocess data is equal to this. At which point we will pull in master, and we will also pull in rename or replacement names. Okay. And then from there, we can simply say sprite JSON post processor dot preprocess data is equal to preprocess, not Oreo, preprocess data. Okay, and that should only require that I re-import. So I'm going to say asset database dot import asset, and then we're going to say I guess we'll do this the manual way. Asset database dot get asset path from sprite texture, followed by that's an import dot I think force update. Yeah. Okay. So in theory, that should handle calling this. We're going to say get sprite metadata. We're getting all of that set up. Okay. So let's, I think that will work. So I'm going to clear this. We have our grass sprites. So if I were to import this, what should happen is sand will turn into, instead of a single sprite mode, it should be set to multiple, and it should also just have all of the sprite mappings from this. That should work. So let's try this. Oof, should I give it a pop-up? Hold on. I guess I already do that, don't I? Okay. So let's go ahead and hit import JSON or JSON. That will show us a little warning here. I half expect this to cause a crash. Look at that. Beautiful. Beautiful. So yeah, all the grass sprites were obviously there, but so are these. Nice. Okay, so now if I look at this in the sprite, I'm a little curious. Do I have to save at all? I don't know if I assume that it did. In any case, let's go ahead and go to the sprite editor. Boom. Look at that. Sand empty, sand pattern 1, sand pattern 5, pattern 8, water shallow corner. Oh man, that is just wonderful. So it worked. And everything worked pretty much exactly as I thought it would. So that's cool. Got that going. That means that particular bit of functionality is pretty much doing everything that I was expecting. Just out of curiosity, I'm going to try to re-import snow real quick to make sure that it does not also re-import with all that data. It doesn't. Wonderful. Cool. So we have a tool now that can export JSON for sprite settings from one particular sprite sheet, and then we can just import them directly into the second one. That is awesome, and that is amazing, and we can even do name formatting, and I am very happy that worked in one go. So now comes the next thing that I want to do, which is instead of importing sprites one-to-one, if you have the same thing, what I would like to do next is handle, we're going to go here to more bricks. So I have set up name information for this first bit of sprites, so basically these blue-green sprites, but I haven't set up anything for the other sprites. And what I would like to do is to be able to automate this process a little bit in such a way that I can basically just shift all of these over by a set offset, and then I can do that and give them the same thing, similar functionality where we can rename things, give them indexers, and then rename those as we see fit. So basically I want to be able to take all of the sprites in this section and just automatically move them to populate here with a specific name, here with a specific name, here with a specific name, so on and so on and so on and so on. This is a little more complicated because, one, I'm not sure how to do bulk edits. I don't know how to delete all of these sprites that aside from these basically. I would prefer to be able to do that. I mean, I guess I could go into the meta file and do that myself. But I'm not super enthusiastic about that. I don't really want to do that. But unfortunately, if I don't do that, I can't really think of a good way for me to how to say it? Basically, I only want to export JSON values for these sprites so that I can then import them with offsets. If I export JSON values for everything, then we'll get just all of this information, and I won't actually be able to do much with it because I won't know what I want to move over and adjust. So, okay. I guess real quick, I'm going to do a quick search to see if I can sort of clean this up a little bit. I'm going to... And that does really make me excited. So we have import, that's all set up. So I started kind of working on this. You can see that we have like an offset collection that draws this information, and we can set up things like what we want our sprite names to be. And I can say something like, since I want this to be more bricks, for example, then I would have something like blue as one of those names. That's pretty much all I would need for this particular thing because it's just the colors of the bricks, I believe. If we were to look at this, I think it's just like, yeah, more bricks, blue, green, 0, 1, top left. So we would replace blue, green with an indexer, and then we would replace it with blue, basically, for this one. And then we would replace it with black for that. And then we replace it with blue-gray, I guess, for that. And then, like, gray, white, green, and brown, I guess. Maybe orange, tan. But before we can do any of that, I do want to look real quick. So I'm going to say unity delete multiple. I spelled delete wrong. Delete multiple sprites from sprite sheet. I mean, if worse comes to worse, I could write an editor tool to do this. Because like there are methods to do so. Yeah, okay. So everything that I've looked up is how to just delete one sprite. It's not how to delete multiple sprites. So I could write a tool to do this, honestly, something that would basically just spool through and get rid of the settings for anything that's not specified. It's not great, but it would work. Alternatively, I could hand edit the meta file. So if I were to go into more bricks, let's go to Show and Explorer. If I look at the meta file for this, you'll see that we have all of this information. And all I would need to do is basically just erase all of this. All the stuff that I don't need, basically. Oh my goodness, there's so much of it. And it becomes a problem. So I'd really rather not do that. I would really rather have a nice way of doing that. But I really don't want to write that tool if there is a convenient way to just delete sprites anyway. But I really don't know what it is. Like I can't seem to do anything there. Holding shift doesn't work. Holding down control just seems to highlight everything. Boo. That complicates things. I really don't want to remake these. I guess it's not the end of the world if I did, but it would be far better if I didn't have to. Okay. All right, you know what? I guess it doesn't really matter. I'm going to hit revert here, close this. I'm just going to export this data. We can export, so blue, green. Oh, sorry, that should be one. Blue, green. Let's go ahead and export this. I'm going to make more bricks. On that, open this up. Okay, so what we're going to do here is we will now have all of these things. Fortunately, in this particular setup, I think everything is going to be... Oh no, it's from top left to bottom right. Right. So the way that it sorts these bricks when you're looking at them in their arrays, it's basically from top left over one row, then down to the next, and so on, which is going to get really messy, basically, until I can get through here. So it's it's a little annoying, but we're basically going to have to manually do this, I think. So let's go ahead and just scrub past anything that's not. Oh man, this is going to take a little bit of time. Okay. We're going to try really, really hard to do this as fast as possible. It's going to take a little bit of time, but this is probably the fastest way that I can do this, since it doesn't seem like there's a way to multi-edit sprites, which kind of sucks, but what are you going to do? Also, hello, Meandering Leaf. It's been a while. How are you doing today? We're currently not working on TextQuest. We're working on a separate thing, but it's a bunch of fun editor tooling. So it should be pretty entertaining nonetheless. So we're going to go ahead and delete all of this, although admittedly this particular part is not super interesting because I'm deleting JSON. More bricks 71. Okay, I'll get rid of you. Block 03. That's all fine. Block 02. Here we are. More bricks, blah, blah, blah. Okay, so we're on horizontal left, which I think is almost at the end. No, we still got about, that's the halfway mark, actually. So we're almost there. More bricks. Let's go ahead and come back down to here. I really am not a fan of this. More bricks. There we are. Vertical. More bricks. Okay. Going through here. Okay. Let's see. Doing okay? Since I was working on making money. That would be nice, but probably not. Let's see. Middle left, middle right, vertical middle, block 4, block 5, 6. Going back through. Fortunately, it's pretty obvious when I hit a chunk at least. So this is really not ideal. I would actually vastly prefer if I had some way of deleting these things, because I have to do this for every single one. So this is actually less useful than I would like. So we're doing 4 vertical bottom, just out of curiosity. I think we have 2 more rows and then we're done, so it's not really the end of the world. I guess I'll finish this particular JSON file, and then we won't do it like this again. We'll actually make a tool for this. So let's get rid of pretty much all this till we get to here. Horizontal left, horizontal middle, right single, block 7. Okay, so before I do anything else, I'm going to go ahead and save. So 03 block 7 is something that we're working on here. Let's go to the sprite editor. Block 7. Okay, so that block 7 is the last one. Everything else is basically nothing. So we can get rid of that safely. Oh, I really wish you would just be so much faster. I guess that's fair. Okay, so I'm going to go down to here. I'm going to go from here, scroll all the way down to here. Just going to hit delete there. Okay, so this is the JSON blob that we actually wanted. Everything else is kind of pointless. Let's go ahead and let that compile. That's not really going to compile, it's just a text asset. So with that, we basically have the data that we need for importing this offset data. Now we need to set up the offset information. So that's going to be assuming that all of the sprite sections are equally distant apart, which is true. So this block is the same distance away from this as this block is times 2, times 3, and then this block, same distance from that, times 1. So we're basically going to need to give it a vector 2 offset. So that's the number of pixels offset. So this is at x0. This is at 160. So it's 160 wide. And this is at 304. This is going to be a lot more complicated. 44. Let's see. That's 204, 200. That's 160. So it's 160 by 160, which is good. And then we can basically apply those values to multipliers. So this isn't going to be like 160 and 0 offset. It's going to just be like 1 times the multiplier in the x offset, basically. Okay, so the offset here, we said it was like 160 by 160. Oops, 160. Pretty straightforward. This is the actual size, and for this, I probably actually want to move this offset. So this is going to be 1 and 0, I think, for blue. That's all we want. Everything's going to be 1 over, but no, nothing in the y. This will be 0 in the x and 1 in the y. This will be 1 and 1, 2 and 1. Yeah, 2 and 1, 3 and 1, 2 and 0, and 3 and 0. So we're going to have this offset be the multiplier, and then we need a base offset up at the top here. So I'm going to go ahead and actually let's go to sprite editor offset collection. It's going to be, we're going to have a public vector to int. This is going to be offset size is equal to vector to int dot 0. Let's go ahead and tooltip this. So this is going to be tooltip distance in pixels, offset in pixels from target, from target sprites to their remapped sprites. Okay, a little awkward, but that is, I think, how we want to phrase that. So I guess I could try to be a little bit more descriptive on the texture. Okay, so from that, that's fine. Let's go to sprite editor offset, go to definition, offset from the original sprite. Let's go ahead and say tooltip, Instead of offset from the original sprite, we're going to say offset multiplier. Okay, offset multiplier from the original sprite. I'm trying to think of ways to clarify these tooltips so that people who aren't me can use these a little bit easier. So I want to say like IE 1 and 0 will move the sprite, not move, will remap sprite 1 times the offset x. Oh, geez, offset size. This is awful. Sprite editor offset collection. Let's go ahead and do this. So yeah, the offset size. We'll remap the sprite 1 times the offset size specified in the x and 0 in the y. Awful, awful, awful. That's almost more confusing. Okay, and I can also just do like this. Okay, so with that, I think we can now go over here, and we're going to need another post-processor. So we don't actually need this importer, it looks like, but we do need the post-processor. And for that, we're going to go ahead and say sprite pre-processed data. That was Well, no, no, it wasn't. Sprite JSON. I don't really want to call it that though. I should probably rename this to Sprite. You know what? Actually, that's fine. So let's go ahead and leave that. That's going to take a second to compile real quick. Sprite preprocessed data was the misnomer. I should have named that like Sprite import preprocessor or Sprite JSON pre whatever. So let's go ahead and get rid of this class. We don't need it. It's not doing anything. So I'm going to make a new post processor that's called Sprite offset JSON post processor. So I'm going to create. I'm going to make this an editor script. Would that make more sense? Not really, actually. That does not help. All right, we'll just stick with the C# script. So this is going to be a Sprite offset JSON post processor. All right. All right, so what we're going to do here, we're going to put this in the not Zelda 2 editor namespace again. This is going to be using Unity editor. We're going to say this is derived from asset post processor. I really wish that I could make animated GIFs, because that would be awesome. Because then I would have that smoke fire just like go back and forth. Sadly, I can't. At least not that I'm aware of, anyway. Okay, so for this, we're going to go ahead and I'm just going to kind of cheat and grab this. I'm going to do this. And I know you're not going to quite work yet, so let's go ahead and we're going to set that up like that. Okay. Oops. There we go. So this isn't going to do anything quite yet. And this is using Sprite preprocessed data. I'm going to say Sprite offset preprocessed data, I guess, is what we want. So great. C# script. Sprite offset preprocess data. Yeah, I'm pretty sure that Twitch doesn't let you do animations, though. Which probably comes from a wide variety of reasons. All right, so this is going to be, again, in the not Zelda 2 editor namespace. It's going to not be derived from anything. It is going to be a struct. We're going to have public Sprite editor mapper data, and then public string Sprite names, and then we need offset information, which I guess can be just handled as a direct reference. So we'll say public Sprite editor offset collection. That makes sense. Offset data. Okay, and then we're gonna go ahead and say public bool is valid. We're gonna say return offset data does not equal null. Okay, that's probably the easiest way to handle that. And then we're gonna need a little bit. We need get sprite metadata. Right. Okay. Oof. Yeah, that's going to be interesting. Oof. Yeah, that's going to be really interesting. Okay. Sure. That's fine. So I'm going to go ahead and actually grab this. I'm going to grab you. And we're going to come down to here. And here is where things get fun. But not really. I'm going to say using the editor. Okay. So this is going to be equal to data.length times offset data dot offsets dot length. That should be correct. The assumption with these tools, or with this particular tool, is that you have set up like one section and then you're just going to be applying those settings to palette swaps within the same texture. So in theory, all of the all of the sprites should have a exact match somewhere else in the sprite sheet, basically. Um, so let's go to we have our metadata. That's all fine. We have our sprite names. And here is where things get to be fun. So I don't want this to iterate through data.length. I want this to iterate through metadata.length or .length. But I need to detect when it gets to no. Okay. So I don't want this to be data.length. I want this to be instead. Oh man, that also doesn't work. How unfortunate. Okay. Sorry, I'm trying to think this through. So the data up here will have all of the information about the existing sprites, and then the offset data is going to have information about where remapped offset sprites should be created. So we need to also include the regular data, because if we don't, then oh wait, hold on. This actually needs to be times offsets dot length times, I'm sorry, +1. There we go. Because it needs to include itself. It needs to include the existing data. So what we're going to do is a little weird. Instead of doing this for loop, we're going to do a different for loop. That's going to be for int I is equal to offset data dot offsets dot length, and then I plus plus. I forgot the I is less than part here. I is less than. And what we need to do here is basically say for each one of the offsets, we need to apply. Oh, we have to do a second for loop, I guess. That's going to make things easy. So we're going to say for int j is equal to 0. J is less than data.length, I guess. J plus plus. Okay, so here's where things get fun. First up, we're actually going to go ahead and do this. This is fine. So all of this will happen without changing. Like, it's going to just be handled as is. Sort of. Ooh. Yeah, it will. Yeah, okay. But is it okay? Oh boy. Mm, mm, mm. Yeah, okay. So I keep trying to think through how I want this to be set up. And in this particular situation, it would be nice if it would just import the existing sprites from the JSON file and then apply offsets by dynamically updating the names on the fly. But it might be better to instead just have the base JSON data in the form of properly indexed strings like we have here. Or is it here? I think it's here. Oh, it wasn't there. It's this one. So have all of these indexes like this, and then all we would do is have a set of offsets with 0, 0 as their offset multiplier, and then that would just format to that. I think that's going to be the most painless way to do this. So that means that then I don't have to do this like complicated weird thing. I can just do that. So for this, we're going to go ahead and just say for each one of our data.lengths within our offset data, we are going to say metadata of I. No, sorry, metadata of I times data.length plus j times data.length plus j. So that makes sense if it's at 0, 0, and then at 1, it'll still be 1, 2, then 1 times, yeah, that should be correct. So as long as we say metadata, so I times data.length plus j, that's going to be equal to new sprite metadata I'm sorry. It's going to be equal to, this is awkward. I gotta apply offsets. I don't think that editor mapper data can be the class that we use. I think we need to have an offset class, unfortunately, because this just doesn't give me, well, okay. I lied. We can go ahead and go down to this. So we can kind of reuse this for multiple things, I guess. I'm going to have to comment these, though, so I don't get them mixed up. So we're going to say C sprite editor mapper data to use when remapping sprites with name changes. Okay. This is going to be sprite data. Well, how about this? Data used for the sprite. These are going to be strings to replace with indexer strings, and then IE do. Okay. So that handles that, and then we need to add a new one of these, which is going to be no. We don't need to we don't need to do a new sprite editor mapper for this. Instead, we need to come down here. This is going to say get unaltered sprite data. Returns sprite data with names formatted using the given sprite names. Strings to replace indexer strings with. Okay, so now we have to do something similar to this, but with offset values as well. Excuse me. So that means we're going to go ahead and grab this. I'm going to copy that, move this down. Instead of sprite names, it's actually going to be sprite offset data. Sprite editor offset. That might be what it is, yeah. Sprite editor offset. And that's going to be formatted with, not with sprite names. This is actually just going to be a regular class. This is also going to be just called offset data. So this is going to be offset data dot sprite names for the formatting. And as far as the border goes, the rect is the important thing. This is the actual physical position in pixels in the texture. So I need to go back over to here, and we need to apply the rect offsets, which is going to be so awful. Okay, so for this, I think we basically want to say, instead of rect is equal to that, we're going to say rect is equal to new rect this dot rect, and then we have some settings that we have to apply. And let's see here. For this, we need to apply offsets from the x and y, I think. Yes, that's all we really care about. So we're going to say frac. This also needs to pass in a vector2 int offset size. It's a little clunky, but okay. So these are going to have x is equal to this dot. Can I do just x? No, of course not. This dot rect dot x plus it's going to be offset size dot x times offset data dot offset dot x. A little awkward. And then we're basically going to do the same thing for y. So instead of x, it's going to be this dot x dot y, offset dot y, offset dot y. Pretty straightforward. So let's go ahead. I'm going to comment this. Returns sprite data with names formatted using the given sprite names and offsets. Well, actually, with names formatted and offsets applied with the given data. Okay, this is going to be data for the sprite offset and renaming, and this is going to be size of the offset to apply to the sprite. Little confusing, but the end user isn't really going to see most of this code. They're not going to have to interact with this. The idea is that it's all automated. I still want to try and give a decent sense of commenting because I personally hate whenever you use third-party assets and they're garbage because for some reason whenever you get third-party assets from the Unity Asset Store, they are garbage. And that's not, I shouldn't be so mean, but I'm just always taken aback whenever I review the code of a third-party asset that we get at the office, and I just get angry because people take shortcuts and are lazy, and it just drives me insane. Anyway, so sprite mapper data is fine. We're gonna go ahead and we're gonna need public sprite offset preprocessed data. We're gonna have to pass in a sprite editor mapper master. We're gonna have that be data master followed by string sprite names. I don't actually think I need that. So I don't think we need this anymore because everything's contained. So we can get rid of you. So instead of this, we're just going to say sprite editor offset collection, offset data. Okay. And then that means that this dot data is going to be equal to data master dot data, and then this dot offset data is equal to offset data. Pretty straightforward, not a lot we have to do there. When we go through here, we're going to say this is equal to data of j dot get sprite metadata, and then we're going to pass in so we need to pass in offset data. Yeah, offset data dot offsets of I followed by offset data dot offset size. And that should give us all of the data that we need. So we're not doing anything with you yet. We have our offset JSON preprocessor or post-processor. Go ahead and come up to here. We're going to need to say public static that, and then we're going to say, what do I call it in the other one? Preprocessed data. That's fair. Preprocessed data is equal to default, and then this is actually so fun fact. Oh, hey, the real Kleinba, welcome back. How you doing today? So this whole idea of using structs as value references and checking if they're valid and whatnot is actually something that I basically lifted wholesale from Unity's addressable assets workflow. It actually seems to work really well when you're working with data like this. They use it in addressable assets to basically determine if an addressable has been properly downloaded, you can basically check the process of it, and it's handled via struct. And we're basically doing the same. We're not checking if something's downloaded, but we're basically using a struct to hold data until we're done with it, and then we just like release it, and well, we don't really release it. We just set it back to being its default state, and then the texture preprocessor doesn't have to do anything again. So that's pretty nice. Sprite import mode is going to be set to multiple, hard-coded, that's fine. Sprite sheet is going to be get sprite metadata. Again, that works everything that we need. Preprocessed data is equal to this. And that, I think, is all we needed to do. Yeah, because that handles the preprocessing. So we should be good there. So we're going to go ahead and come back over here to sprite editor mapper, not the data. Close some of these things. Close you. Sprite editor mapper, data master, you're fine. Get rid of this. And this. We'll just go back to, okay. So, you're done. We're going to basically do all this stuff again. Grab this. We're not quite done yet. This is, instead of sprite JSON, we're going to say sprite offset JSON post processor is equal to sprite offset preprocessed data. And then instead of replacement names, this is going to be offset data. Is that what I made it? Yep, offset data. All that should basically work. Looks like we're looking pretty good there. Okay. Doing okay. What about you? I'm doing all right. Taking a break from TextQuest stuff for the weekend. Working on this 2D tool workflow to help speed up my productivity, and helping a developer friend of mine get his art pack set up in Unity. So it's a fun excuse for me to just mess around with Unity 2D editor tooling and eventually the tile map stuff. So hitting the beers a bit hard tonight, Travis. Okay, so we have import sprite settings with offset. This will override any existing settings, cannot be undone. That's all fine. Okay, I don't think we're doing anything with this quite yet. Draw import sections with offset. We don't need sprite names anymore. I think we can get rid of this. We don't need replacement names either. Yeah, we really don't. Let's go ahead and just get rid of this. Then we're going to get rid of you. I'm going to move this out to here. Just go ahead and do that. That's all fine. We want to keep this help box set up. That's all fine too. And I'm actually going to do a little... let me think. I want to handle this. Oh, right. We'll do some... You know, it will be fancy. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and say color cached GUI is equal to GUI.color. Color. Actually, it's not going to be color. It's going to be background color. Okay, and then we're going to say if I can't spell, I can't type. What's going on? It's all gone wrong. If offset value or offset data is equal to null, then we're going to say GUI.background color is equal to color.red. And then after that, basically right here, we're just going to say GUI.background color is equal to cached GUI. Pretty straightforward. Okay. And once we're done with that, we're going to need to come down to here. I'm just going to basically grab all of this. We're going to call this cached GUI color. Paste that in there. Okay. And this is all good. This is going to be import offset. Yeah. Okay. This is going to be a little different. Grab this. We're just going to paste this down here. It's going to be sprite offset. I'm going to say import sprite data for the target texture from the and apply offsets. Blah. What a terrible way to phrase that. All right, cool. So, hey, that worked out nicely. Let's go ahead and we're going to have an offset size of 160 by 160. This is going to probably annihilate these just to be safe. I'm actually going to duplicate you. This should have all of the same settings. Everything should be basically the same. Nice. So I'm just going to change this over to more bricks. This is now more bricks 1. That way, in case something goes wrong, I can just delete that asset and not have to worry about it. We have our sprite JSON set up. We have our offset data set up. We can hide that if we so choose. I am very curious to know what happens if I... Oh, good. I did make it a... Nice. Good on me. I made that scrollable, so if it's like a super long thing with a lot of different settings, then it'll be different, which is actually kind of what we want. So I'm going to say we're importing not from grass sprites, but from... What are you? More bricks. So we want to pull in more bricks. Okay. We have a couple of things. So this is going to be blue-green. Actually, no. This lets me rename this. How convenient. I don't actually want these to be called blue-green. I want these to be called teal or aquamarine. I guess the only way for me to know is, what do you think? Should these top left tiles be teal or aquamarine? Because I've been calling them blue-green, and I want them to be either teal or aquamarine. So here's what teal looks like. That's teal. That's aquamarine. They are very similar. Actually, I guess teal is a little darker. I'm just going to call them teal, honestly, unless people have strong feelings about it. Cyan was the other thing. That's what I was thinking of. So it's either teal or cyan. But I kind of lean teal. Alright, so let's go ahead and let that work. So I'm just going to rename this teal. Fine. Cyan. It's a more common name, I guess. So this is going to be 0, 0, no offset. We don't need to worry about sprite names besides just the first one. Cool. So let's go ahead and we're going to have 8 of these. We can go ahead and get rid of these. So this is going to be, instead of cyan, this is going to be blue. There's going to be 1 offset in the X. And then this is going to be black. It's going to be 2 offset in the X. This is going to be blue-gray, I guess. So it's over here. I don't really know. I guess I could call it like blue 2. That would be a little awkward, but I guess it would fit. Or maybe how about navy? Terrible. You know, indigo, I guess. It's a little awkward. So that's going to be 0, 1, 2, 3. That's good. Okay. So we're going to say sprite names. This is going to be orange. How about orange or brown for this one on the bottom left? How about we'll just do orange, I guess. Orange. It's going to be 1 in the Y. Oh, no, it's going to be -1 in the Y. Got to be careful, because Y is not the top left, Y is the bottom left. So since we're mapping from the top left down, I need to say -1, not +1. That does work, right? Oh, no, that might not. Hold on. We're going to come back down here. this. This. As long as I never reference its size outside of this multiplier. Okay, we're good then. I wanted to make sure I didn't use the size for some reason as an indexer. So we should be good there. Okay, sprite names here. This is going to be green. This is going to be 1 and -1. Sprite names here. This is going to be white, I guess. And this is going to be 2 and -1. And this is going to be 3 and -1. Let's go ahead and do that. And this is going to be gray. Okay, so I keep saving out of habit. As a quick validation check to show you that I'm not just like cheating, all of these sprites are just named generic more bricks underscore whatever. The only ones that are properly named are the top left, and we're actually going to blow those away. So what should happen once we run this function is all of the sprite names we've set up for these sprites will be transferred and renamed for all of these individual sections. So let's go ahead and give that a try. So we're just going to say import sprite JSON, import sprite settings for more bricks 1. That's the texture from more bricks underscore sprites. That's the JSON file. Yes. And then more bricks underscore cyan. That worked. Oh yeah. Yes, it's all working. How wonderful. So all I have to do now, whenever I create a sprite sheet that has tiling like this, I only need to handle creating sprites for the top for like one section, and then I can just map them all over the place. Awesome. Gray, white, green, orange, blue, black, and indigo. Cool. So that just saved me probably, I think it took me about 10 minutes to do this section, maybe 5. It was a lot of tedious effort. Point is that what took me minutes before now literally takes me seconds. So that is an exponential performance increase or efficiency increase. So cool. Also, I'm going to go ahead and say none here. And nice, isn't that cool? So now if we don't have, you should not be like that. Hold on. Here we are. So we're going to say if sprite texture is equal to null, or sprite JSON is equal to null, or sprite offset data. Offset data is equal to null. So we don't want that button to be clickable unless you have everything set up properly. Nice. Okay. Cool. So we have basically everything set up now. I don't think we need this sprite data here either, do we? Nope. Okay. How awesome is that? So let's go ahead and clean up. Let's see, sprite names. We're doing anything with you? We're not. So let's get rid of this, and then we'll move this down to here. Pretty straightforward. All right. So cool. We've simplified some of our tooling. We've added some nice little bits of sort of editor workflows, so you can see that this is clearly not set up properly. It's flashing red. We can assign this. By the way, this create button, the idea is that if you don't have anything set up here, you can click create and it'll like navigate to somewhere and then it'll create it for you. The only problem is that I forgot how to do that off the top of my head, because for some reason Unity doesn't have it built in. But it's not crazy hard. I was just too lazy to actually look up how to do it again. So yeah, all of these offset values, I chose to store them in a scriptable object. so that it would be a little bit easier to set these things up. It doesn't really make sense to have them be like a text file, because then you would have to, if you want to edit it, you have to edit a text file, and that's dumb and weird. And having them be in a scriptable object lets them persist. So you could, in theory, basically duplicate this offset scriptable object and just reapply it somewhere else with some slight modifications, or you can just reuse it. Honestly, it doesn't matter. But by storing it in this way, it lets you keep that data in case you need to reuse it. So that is pretty much the two major tools that I wanted to do today. So I got all that working. So that means that when the time comes, I'll be able to set up sand and snow basically instantly. All I have to do is finish setting up all of this. Okay, so the next thing that I wanted to do, we've got about 20 minutes. There's one more tool that I think I want to try and do. Let's see if we can do it. So, I'm going to go ahead and get this, close this. I'm going to create a new folder. We're going to call this Sprite Layer Window. It's a little awkward, but I think we can do it. All right. So I'm going to create a... Actually, you know what? I'm going to make this an editor script. It's not quite going to do what I want. We're going to have to do some adjustments, but this will set things up a little bit faster. So I'm going to call this Sprite Layer... How about Sprite Overlap Window? Yeah, Sprite Overlap Window. That might be a little bit better. And for the curious, what this is going to do is basically right here, you can see that we have this section called Overlap. And the idea is that you can have chunks of a sprite that have a lot of transparency, and then those are meant to be layered over something else. So this is going to be just a quick editor tool to let you bake out new sprites that are using basically a bunch of overlay sprites, however many you want, and it will grab the pixels as it goes down and fills them in, basically. So let's go ahead and revert this. We can close this for now. So this tool, by the way, before we move on, this tool is not quite finished. There's a bunch of usability things that I want to do. I'm going to change these labels, these buttons at the top, to be a toolbar, like an actual proper toolbar. And then I'm going to give them icons instead of just words. And all of these have actual hover tooltips. The idea being that once we set this up, you'll be able to quickly go between these three sections and set up things as you see fit. So it should be a pretty nice way to handle this. Let's make sure that everything's working right. Yeah, okay. So this should be a nice tool. I'm hopeful that I can polish this up. I'm thinking about putting this maybe on the Unity Asset Store to improve 2D workflows. I mean, as you can see, it obviously will help immensely for duplicate tiles. Anyway, let's go ahead and close this. We're going to go back here to Sprite Layer Window. I'm going to rename this to Sprite Overlap Window. Okay, let's open this up. And we're going to get rid of you. We're going to make you editor window. We're going to get rid of this. Okay. This is going to be, instead of common editor, it's going to be, again, not Zelda 2D editor. We are going to we're going to come down here and we'll say private static void open window. This is going to be a menu item. And that's going to be window. It's window, not windows, correct? Yeah, window. Sleepy Owl 2D. Sprite overlap editor, I guess. So I want to say get window, sprite overlap window, and then we're going to say true, whatever, true. No, we want it to be false true, false string true. Yes. So hold on, sprite overlap. Ooh, overlay might have also worked. Um, anyway, so what these do, if you've never worked with Unity's editor system, in order, this first bool tells the window if it's a utility window. If it's a utility window, it can't be docked. So instead of having tabs like you see all of these windows, it's got its own like standalone header, similar to the Unity header at the very top there. The idea being that it's meant to be like a floating utility window that will always draw over Unity. They have their perks. They can be less convenient than Unity sometimes because if you click off onto a different application like Chrome, for example, if you want to compare color values, overlay windows or utility windows go away. They just vanish. And then when you click back on Unity, they show up again. So I found it's typically easier to just not have it be a utility window unless you're doing something very, very specific. So I set that to false. The string is the name on the tab, and then true basically just forces it to focus. So if it's hidden somewhere or behind the editor, or if it's in a tab that's not being displayed, it'll like select that and make sure that you can see it. Okay, and then for this, we're just going to say dot show, which is just what calls it. Okay, so down here, we're going to say private void on GUI. Pretty straightforward there. So here is where things are going to get interesting. What I want to do here is basically allow sprites to be sort of set up in a list and then have a preview be displayed that shows what happens when those sprites are overlaid, and then you can export that as a texture. It's a little awkward, but I think we can do it. Although, admittedly, we've only got about 15 minutes. So let's see how far we can get. So first things first, we're going to say private. We can just have it be sprite. We're going to make it an array, not a list. Sprites is equal to new sprite. Man, I hate working with non-editors like this. That's fine. Okay. So, for this, the reason that we're doing it as a sprite and not as a texture reference is because if we wanted to do the actual overlay sprites that I showed you, those are sub sprites. They're not the whole texture. So if we just did textures, all we would really be able to get is information about the texture itself, but we need to get information about the sprite within the texture. That's going to be interesting, and I'm willing to bet it's going to get super wonky and weird. I'm willing to bet we're going to need to say using Unity editor dot u2d. So just out of curiosity, Unity editor dot u2d dot sprite atlas extensions. Oof, that's not what I was hoping for. Sprite packer modes sprites dot utility packer. These are all deprecated, I think. Yeah. Dot get sprite texture, I think is what I need. No, well, maybe sprite indices. I might need sprite UVs. It's. Let me think. All right, I think I know what I can do to get this. It's going to be a little messy, but okay. So first things first, really, before we do any of that, we're going to want to say, man, should I just do it as a serialized object? That would be much easier. I could be so lazy if I did that. Ah! Okay. No. Okay. We're going to need a couple of things. In addition to the sprites, we're going to need to have private... Well, no. I guess I don't really need a string, do I? Alright. So all we need are the sprites, actually. We're going to go ahead and... It's going to be a little weird. So I want it to be the preview area up top. Preview area, then the sprite area, and then the export area. So at the very bottom here, we're just going to say if GUI layout dot button new GUI content export. Just going to do that. Bam. Why are you being so troublesome? Okay. So that's going to be at the very bottom. Sprite area is going to have, oh, that means we need a couple of things actually. So we're going to need a private vector2 sprite, if I could spell, sprite scroll is equal to vector2.0. And then we're going to come down here and we're going to say sprite scroll is equal to editor GUI layout dot begin vertical, sorry, not begin vertical, begin scroll view. We're going to say scroll, sprite scroll. Okay, and then at the bottom here, we're going to say editor GUI layout dot end scroll view. Okay. So we're going to need to draw all of these sprites right here. And then we need to have a preview area that lets us visualize the sprites. So, thinking about how we want to do this. Oh man, I am going to make this so awkward for me, aren't I? Okay. Trying to think about how to do this properly. Basically, the way that I want this to be stylized is it's going to be, I got the hiccups, sorry. A window with a button at the bottom that says export. At the top, we're going to have this preview image area where you can see what it's going to look like. And then in the middle, I basically just want to have a series of texture or of sprites that you can see. And ideally, they would be presented in texture format, but I'm going to guess that they're not really going to do that, which is kind of annoying. That way you can clearly see what's going into what. Yeah, this is a little awkward. Oh man, if I wanted this tool to actually be cool, I would probably make it a reorderable list, which is a whole thing. Also, reorderable lists only work with serialized classes, which would mean I would have to make this a serialized object. That's a bit much to do on the Devstream today, so instead, I'm going to go ahead and we're going to say, actually, do we want that to be the case? Okay, yeah. So I'm going to say editor GUI layout dot begin vertical, and we're going to say editor styles dot help box, and at the very bottom here, we're going to say editor GUI layout dot end vertical. It's all fine. Okay. And inside of this, we're going to say private bool is expanded is equal to false. So we're going to say is expanded is equal to editor GUI layout dot fold out, followed by is expanded, and then new GUI content, sprites for now, that's fine, followed by true. This last true lets you click on the label to toggle it open or closed. If you don't do that, you have to click directly on the arrow in a foldout, which is very tedious in my opinion. So we're going to go ahead and say if is expanded, and then we're going to do this stuff. Okay. And the preview area. It's going to be interesting. I think I might need to design this a little bit more. I have an idea about how I want to do it, like I said, but I feel like the usability workflow on it's going to be a little bit awkward. Yeah, so you can see that like that's functional, but it's not really doing much. So export probably also should not be functional. So I'm going to say bool cached GUI is equal to GUI dot enabled if sprites dot length is equal to 0. GUI dot enabled is equal to false. GUI dot enabled is equal to cached GUI dot. No, that's fine. It's probably okay. I should probably make sure that none of them are null as well, but at the end of the day, it's okay. So, all right. I think we're gonna. While try and print all. I think a better one would be while try and print. I've noticed that I always say a bunch. Case in point, that was unintentional. So we made some pretty good progress actually today. We have total sprite remapping working, so you can export data from one sprite and import it as is with name changes onto another texture entirely, and it all maps correctly. We can. I'm actually gonna do a couple of adjustments here. We can export JSON data from a sprite and then import that data with offset information, which is also very nice. I am not 100% sure. Sleepy Out 2D sprite editor. I don't know if it would make sense for me to allow me to like exclude sprite names here, basically to allow me to ignore names that aren't actually being that I don't want it to pay attention to. That would be a really useful thing if I wanted to ignore default values, like the situation we ran into before, where I made so more bricks here has like a bunch of these default bricks, and what I could do is basically say in this export window, I can give it a second array that's like ignore names, and then if it contains any of, like I would probably give it the ignore name more bricks with a lowercase m, since I uppercased all of these. That would mean that none of these would be included in the export, and it would only be this. That'd be very useful for like quickly laying things out with automatic slicing, and then just setting up the ones you want and then dumping those basically. So that might be something I can do real quick. Case in point again. But for now, I think we're in a pretty good place. We made a lot of progress, and like I said, this is all tooling that's mostly for my own benefit, but also I am thinking about putting this stuff on the asset store. It seems like it would be pretty useful actually. Just the time savings alone. I mean, good God, being able to remap everything from one massive texture like this to the next would be a huge time saver. So, all right, I think we're gonna call it a day there. Announcements. So I should be good to. Yeah, I don't think I have any schedule conflicts for this coming week, so we should be on schedule for our normal streaming times next week. And aside from that, I think we're pretty good. So, so yeah, pretty good place to stop for the night. And yeah, so as always, I want to thank you all very much for watching, and I will see you all next time.